Welcome back to another episode of Late Night with AI, part of the 4slash family. Today, we're looking into, well, a real clash of the titans, honestly. A story with more twists and turns than a self-driving car trying to parallel park on a busy street. We're talking about the ongoing saga between Elon Musk and OpenAI. Now, you've probably seen the headlines buzzing around, but we're going to try and unpack this whole situation, the lawsuits, the countersuits, the very public sparring by sifting through various reports and documents. Our aim is really just to give you a much clearer picture of what's actually at the heart of this AI showdown.
It's certainly become a captivating drama, hasn't it? Especially with OpenAI's recent countersuit accusing Musk of, well, actively trying to undermine them.
Yeah, it's quite something.
Where do you think the initial spark for this whole conflagration came from?
Well, for me, it all kind of boils down to the origin story of OpenAI itself. Picture this. It's 2015. A group of really smart people, you've got Musk, Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, Ilya Sutskever, others, they get together with this almost utopian vision to build artificial general intelligence, the kind of AI that can do pretty much anything a human can, but crucially, to do it safely and for the benefit of everyone, not just a handful of shareholders. The whole idea was this nonprofit structure, keeping them away from the pressures of chasing profits. Fast forward to today, and it's a full-on legal battle royale.
Indeed. And the central tension seems to revolve around what Musk claims was a founding agreement. He essentially argues, look, we had a deal, nonprofit, humanity first, keep things open source.
Right, that's his core argument.
And he contends that OpenAI's current form, with the for-profit arm and that huge partnership with Microsoft, is a complete betrayal of that original commitment.
But OpenAI, they just flat out deny it.
OpenAI, on the other hand, disputes the existence of any legally binding agreement that matches Musk's description. They're pretty strong on that point.
It's like a tech world divorce, isn't it? Both sides remembering the initial vows very differently. So let's maybe dig into those early days. What exactly were the circumstances around OpenAI's formation? How significant was that nonprofit model? Who were the key players? And, what evidence do we actually have of this so-called founding agreement from the start?
Okay, yeah. The formation of OpenAI back in December 2015 was definitely rooted in an ambition that, well, many would consider quite idealistic. These influential tech figures united with a very clear public goal: advanced digital intelligence, especially AGI, like AI surpassing human capabilities in a way that serves all of humanity.
And the nonprofit structure was key to that.
Absolutely central. Specifically, it was a 501c3 organization under U.S. tax law. That gives them tax-exempt status, allows for tax-deductible donations. The whole point was to insulate them from typical corporate pressures, profit motive, shareholder demands, let them focus purely on long-term research and safety. Their stated aim was value for everyone rather than shareholders.
Which, in theory, sounds fantastic. But let's be real. Trying to achieve AGI, that probably requires a mountain of cash, right? Was a purely donation-based model ever truly going to work?
That's a really pertinent question. And even back then, in the early stages, there were signs of the practical challenges. Interestingly, some internal communications from November 2015 suggest Musk himself actually questioned if a strict nonprofit was the best structure.
Oh, really? Even Musk?
Yeah. He apparently proposed a kind of hybrid model, putting a standard for-profit entity alongside the nonprofit. This early comment sort of hints at a recognition right from the get-go of the huge financial resources that would likely be needed for such a grand project.
So the seeds of the current conflict might have been planted way back then in those initial chats about funding. And what about this whole open source idea? The name OpenAI certainly suggests a commitment to transparency. Was that a non-negotiable thing from day one?
The emphasis on openness was definitely a foundational principle. Yeah, reflected right in the name. The initial commitment was to encourage researchers to publish findings, share patents, foster collaboration. This was partly meant as a counterweight to big players like Google's DeepMind dominating AI research.
Right, democratize it a bit.
Exactly. Prevent any single entity from having too much control. However, even back then, this commitment wasn't absolute. Internal discussions, which OpenAI later made public, show acknowledgments that as they got closer to AGI, they might need to become, quote, less open about the underlying science.
Oh, okay.
While still ensuring the benefits of AI were widely distributed after it was created. And reportedly, Musk agreed with this more nuanced view at the time.
So Open came with some asterisks attached even in the early days. Let's talk about the money, the initial backing. I remember hearing about a big funding push.
Oh yeah, the initial fundraising goal was pretty ambitious. Altman and Brockman were reportedly aiming for about $100 million in commitments. But Musk apparently pushed for a much bigger public announcement, $1 billion, to give the project more credibility in it.
$1 billion? Wow.
And he even reportedly pledged to personally cover any shortfall to reach that target. The initial funders were a who's who of tech. Musk, Altman, Brockman, Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, Jessica Livingston, AWS, Infosys, YC Research.
Quite the lineup.
But OpenAI later stated the nonprofit ultimately got less than $45 million in total donations from Musk, compared to over $90 million from other donors. The exact figures are still debated, but his initial financial input was definitely significant in getting OpenAI launched.
Right, so Musk was a major early backer, vision, money, even if the exact number is fuzzy. Now, this founding agreement he keeps bringing up, is there an actual signed piece of paper somewhere, like a formal contract?
Yeah.
Or is it informal, like a handshake deal?
That's really the core question in this whole legal fight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Musk claims this agreement, nonprofit status, benefit humanity, mostly open source, wasn't put into a single signed document.
Okay.
Instead, he argues it was memorialized in various communications and, crucially, in OpenAI's certificate of incorporation filed in Delaware.
But OpenAI says...
OpenAI and its leadership flatly deny any legally binding founding agreement like Musk describes exists. They've even called it a fiction he made up.
Strong words. So what do the actual legal documents that set up OpenAI say?
Looking at the certificate of incorporation is absolutely key here. It does establish OpenAI, Inc., as a nonprofit under Delaware law. Its stated purpose includes promoting AI research and distributing technology for public benefit. It explicitly says it's not organized for the private gain of any person, and its property is irrevocably dedicated to nonprofit purposes.
Okay, sounds pretty nonprofit so far.
However, and this is a really important bit legal analysts point out, it also permits OpenAI to engage in any lawful act or activity for which nonprofit corporations may be organized under Delaware law.
So there's some wiggle room baked in.
Potentially, yeah. And while it mentions they will seek to open source technology when applicable, it doesn't seem to be an absolute legally enforceable requirement for all tech, especially as they get closer to AGI.
So it seems like there might have been some built-in flexibility for future changes, even in that initial legal paperwork.
Precisely. And then you have the OpenAI Charter, which came later. It outlines guiding principles like broadly distributed benefits, long-term safety, technical leadership, collaboration. It even states their primary fiduciary duty is to humanity.
Okay.
Interestingly, the Charter also anticipates needing substantial money, but commits to minimizing conflicts of interest. It also notes that safety and security concerns will reduce our traditional publishing in the future, again suggesting a potential move away from total openness. So while the initial setup was definitely rooted in nonprofit ideals, it looks like there were ambiguities and acknowledgments of future practical challenges embedded right from the start. Musk's own early suggestion of a hybrid model, his push for that massive funding target. It also suggests he knew a pure donation approach might not cut it long term.
Okay, so let's fast forward a few years then. The initial idealistic vision starts hitting the wall of, well, the very real and very expensive demands of developing cutting-edge AGI. This is where things start to diverge, right?
Look.
Musk leaves the board in 2018. What exactly led to that departure?
Yes, by early 2017, the OpenAI team really grasped the sheer scale of resources needed for serious AGI pursuit. We're talking potentially billions a year just for computing power.
Billions. Just for compute.
Yeah, not even counting the rapidly rising costs of attracting top AI talent, they were already offering multi-million-dollar packages to get leading experts. It became clearer and clearer that the original nonprofit model, relying heavily on donations, probably wasn't sustainable if they wanted to stay at the forefront of AI research.
Okay, makes sense.
This realization sparked serious talks about forming a for-profit entity.
And that's when the boardroom drama really kicked into high gear.
You could definitely say that.
Yeah.
As they discussed this potential shift towards a for-profit structure in late 2017, early 2018, big disagreements popped up between Musk and the rest of the leadership, especially Altman and Brockman.
Uh-oh.
According to OpenAI and various reports, Musk pushed for having substantial control over this new for-profit arm. He allegedly demanded majority equity, initial board control, and even wanted to be appointed CEO himself.
Wow. Sounds like a very Muskian approach, sort of my way or the AI highway, maybe?
That's a pretty good way to put it. However, the other founders weren't on board. They felt giving that much control to one person, even Musk, went against their core mission of benefiting humanity broadly and safely.
Do they push back?
They did. When his demands for control weren't met, Musk then apparently proposed a merger with Tesla.
With Tesla, his car company.
Yep. Emails later released by OpenAI show Musk suggesting OpenAI should attach to Tesla as its cash cow, saying it was exactly right, and the only path that could even hope to hold a candle to Google.
That's ambitious.
That idea was also a non-starter for Altman and the others.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep OpenAI independent, and maybe were also wary of operating under Musk's well-documented management style. OpenAI even alleges that during these crucial talks, Musk started withholding promised funding, which forced Reid Hoffman to step in with some interim cash.
Wow, that's some intense behind-the-scenes stuff. So his departure in February 2018 wasn't just about avoiding potential conflicts of interest with Tesla's own AI plans.
Well, the publicly stated reason was potential conflicts as Tesla ramped up its AI for self-driving, and that was certainly a real factor given the competition for AI talent. But the narrative now strongly pushed by OpenAI suggests his departure was primarily because they rejected his demands for control and the Tesla merger idea. They also claim Musk was really frustrated that OpenAI was falling behind Google in the AI race and believed their chances of success were, quote, 0% without his or Tesla's direct involvement and a massive cash infusion, like immediately.
0%? Ouch.
He reportedly told the team he'd then go build his own AGI competitor within Tesla. While he initially seemed supportive of OpenAI going its own way, he apparently remained deeply skeptical they could succeed without billions in immediate funding.
So it seems like a classic power struggle mixed with different strategic visions, maybe. And his financial contributions, part of that big initial pledge, they just stopped after he left.
Yes, despite some early signs he might continue as a donor, multiple reports suggest his payments, part of that original big pledge, did stop after he left in February 2018. This undoubtedly put the nonprofit in a tricky financial spot, really highlighting the urgent need for a new, sustainable funding plan.
Which brings us right to the creation of OpenAI LP in 2019. With this pretty unique capped profit model, it sounds like a very Silicon Valley way to try and square lofty ideals with the hard reality of needing huge investment. How did that work exactly?
Precisely. Facing that big financial pressure after Musk left, OpenAI announced this major structural change in March 2019. They set up OpenAI LP, a new for-profit subsidiary, under this novel capped profit framework.
Capped profit.
The core idea was to attract the massive investment needed for AGI research while still sticking to their fundamental mission. The original OpenAI, Inc. nonprofit remained the ultimate controlling entity. Its board was still bound by that fiduciary duty to the original mission, benefit humanity first, not just financial returns.
So the nonprofit was still theoretically in charge, pulling the strings.
That was the design, yes. The nonprofit board kept control over the for-profit subsidiary, OpenAI LP, through a separate management entity. OpenAI LP could issue equity-like stakes to investors and offer competitive salaries to get top talent, but, and this is key, the potential financial returns for these investors and employees were explicitly capped at a certain multiple of their initial investment.
Okay, so there was a limit on how much money investors could make.
Right. The goal was enough incentive to get the capital and talent, but ensuring any excess value generated beyond those caps, especially from AGI itself, would ultimately flow back to the nonprofit for humanity's broader benefit. Plus, the nonprofit board kept the authority to declare when AGI was achieved, and that specific AGI tech was explicitly excluded from the for-profit arms commercial deals.
Sounds intricate, definitely. And this is when Microsoft comes into the picture in a really big way, right?
Absolutely. Just a few months later, July 2019, OpenAI announced that landmark partnership with Microsoft. It started with a huge $1 billion investment from Microsoft.
$1 billion, just like that.
It was a game changer. Not just the money, but also giving OpenAI access to Microsoft's powerful Azure cloud infrastructure. That was crucial for training those massive AI models they were building.
Right, they needed that compute power.
The collaboration deepened a lot over the next few years. Microsoft's total investment reportedly hit a staggering $13 billion by early 2023.
$13 billion.
In return for all that cash and compute, Microsoft got exclusive cloud provider status for OpenAI and the right to weave OpenAI's tech into its own products. They ended up with roughly a 49% stake in a related OpenAI entity. This huge commercial partnership really shows how vital commercialization became for anyone serious about competing in AI against the tech giants. The big shift wasn't if they needed massive funding, but how they'd get it, and who'd ultimately control a tech's direction, which leads directly back to Musk's earlier exit and this major alliance with Microsoft under the capped profit model.
And Musk watched all this happen and was, let's just say, not amused.
That would be putting it mildly. Following the capped profit model, and especially after ChatGPT became this huge public phenomenon, Musk's public criticism of OpenAI just exploded.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of that.
His main point, which he hit again and again, was that they had completely abandoned their original mission. He argued they'd gone from an open-source nonprofit for humanity to a closed-source, profit-driven thing, effectively controlled by Microsoft's commercial interests.
He didn't pull any punches.
Not at all. He even suggested they should rename themselves Closed AI, or maybe Super Closed Source for Maximum Profit AI. He felt they'd lost all transparency and were putting Microsoft's profits way ahead of their initial altruistic goals.
Ouch. Those are some pretty sharp accusations. And then he himself jumps into the AI game with xAI, right?
Exactly. March 2023, he officially launches xAI, a company explicitly set up to compete directly with OpenAI and the other big AI labs. That move basically turned him from just a concerned former co-founder into a direct business rival, adding a whole new layer of complexity to his ongoing feud with Altman and OpenAI.
So the stage was well and truly set for a good old-fashioned legal showdown. Musk finally pulled the trigger with his lawsuit in February 2024. What were his main legal arguments?
February 29, 2024, Musk files his lawsuit in California, names OpenAI, Altman, Brockman-related entities as defendants. The core of his legal case was the alleged breach of this founding agreement. He claimed this agreement legally required OpenAI to stay nonprofit, prioritize humanity's benefit above all, and operate with mostly open-source tech.
Okay, that's the foundation.
He argued they had, quote, incinerated this pact by going for-profit and getting so close with Microsoft, essentially becoming a closed-source de facto subsidiary of Microsoft that put Microsoft's profits first. He also made the rather bold claim that their GPT-4 model already constituted a form of AGI and was being improperly licensed to Microsoft under terms meant for pre-AGI tech.
Whoa, hold on. Claiming GPT-4 is already AGI. That's a pretty big statement.
It is indeed, and it's a claim that's, well, highly debatable within the AI research community. Based on all this, Musk alleged several legal violations: breach of contract, promissory estoppel, basically arguing he relied on their promises to his detriment.
Yeah.
Breach of fiduciary duty, saying they misused his donations and violated their duty to the nonprofit's mission, unfair competition, and he demanded a full accounting of their finances.
So he wanted them to basically undo everything.
He sought a court order forcing OpenAI to go back to his interpretation of the founding agreement, open source, public benefit first,
Yeah.
and to stop OpenAI, its leaders, and Microsoft from profiting from their AGI tech. He also wanted a detailed breakdown of fund usage, return of allegedly improper profits, repayment of his donations, which he claimed were over $44 million, and both compensatory and punitive damages. Later in federal court, he even tried to block OpenAI's planned conversion into a for-profit public benefit corporation.
So he really threw the legal kitchen sink at them. How did OpenAI initially react to this barrage?
OpenAI came out swinging, both legally and publicly. On March 5, 2024, they published blog posts directly refuting his claims and stating their intent to get the lawsuit dismissed. Crucially, they included snippets of emails they claimed were from Musk himself.
Ah, the email receipts.
Their counter-narrative was essentially, Musk knew all along about the massive funding needs. He actually supported a for-profit structure, as long as he controlled it or it involved Tesla, and he'd agreed that openness would likely change as they got closer to AGI.
So their argument was basically, he's conveniently changing his tune now that he's not in charge and has his own competing company.
That's the clear implication, yes. In the California state court where it was first filed, OpenAI argued Musk's case was fundamentally flawed because this supposed founding agreement was, in their words, make-believe. They said he hadn't shown any actual enforceable contract matching his description. They also argued he lacked the legal standing to sue over a nonprofit's internal governance. Usually, that's up to directors or state officials. Plus, they contended the things he was asking for, like forcing them to open-source GPT-4 or legally define AGI, weren't things a court could realistically order. Throughout their initial response, they consistently painted the lawsuit as sour grapes, from someone regretting leaving and now trying to hurt a successful competitor to benefit his own company, XAI.
And then things took a bit of a strange turn, didn't they? Musk just dropped the state lawsuit.
He did. June 2024, just a day before a court hearing on OpenAI's challenges, Musk voluntarily dismissed his state court suit. No public explanation given. It was puzzling for many watching.
Yeah, seemed odd, but that wasn't the end of it, was it?
Not by a long shot, because he then refiled the lawsuit in federal court and significantly added Microsoft as a defendant. That definitely turned up the heat.
It certainly did. Adding Microsoft is a big move.
August 2024, he refiles and heavily amends the lawsuit in federal court, adds Microsoft, and also includes his own company, XAI, as a co-plaintiff.
Okay, bringing XAI in officially.
Yeah, which really bolstered OpenAI's argument that Musk's motives were, at least partly, about competitive advantage. The federal suit repeated many original claims, but also added new allegations. Violations of the RCO Act, the anti-racketeering law, often used against organized crime, plus claims of fraud, false advertising, and antitrust violations, specifically alleging an anti-competitive boycott.
Okay, he really went for it with those new claims. So how did OpenAI and Microsoft respond to this new, broader attack?
Both filed new motions to dismiss the amended suit in February 2025. OpenAI called Musk's lengthy 105-page complaint a grudge in search of a lawsuit, saying it jumped between legal theories and relied on fact-free and often ad hominem conclusions. They stuck to their argument. It's a baseless attempt to harm a competitor.
And Microsoft?
Microsoft, in its own dismissal motion, argued the claims against it lacked any real factual or legal basis. They basically said they shouldn't be dragged into a fight about OpenAI's founding mission, which Microsoft wasn't part of.
So still lots of legal back and forth, both sides digging in. Then came that really weird episode of Musk trying to buy OpenAI's nonprofit arm for almost $100 billion. What was that all about?
That was definitely a surprising twist. February 2025, while his request to block the for-profit conversion was still in court, Musk led an unsolicited takeover bid, $97.4 billion for OpenAI's nonprofit controlling entity. It involved XAI, several VC firms, and allies like Ari Emanuel and John Lonsdale.
$97 billion. And Altman's response was pretty blunt, right?
Sam Altman's public response was a very succinct, "No thank you, but we will buy Twitter for $9.74 billion if you want."
Okay.
The OpenAI board unanimously rejected the offer. They said it was not in the best interests of OAI's mission and called it just Musk's latest attempt to disrupt his competition. Their lawyers quickly pointed out the seeming contradiction. Musk trying to acquire for private gain the very assets his lawsuit claims should be for public benefit. They labeled it a sham bid meant to harass and undermine them.
It certainly seemed a bit theatrical. And didn't Musk then reportedly say he'd withdraw the bid if they stopped the for-profit conversion, which kind of suggested it was more of a legal tactic?
Exactly. It really reinforced the view that it was a tactical move tied directly to the lawsuit and the planned conversion to a for-profit public benefit corporation.
And now, the absolute latest twist. OpenAI has officially filed a countersuit against Musk. What are they accusing him of this time?
Yes, April 9th, 2025, OpenAI finally went on the offensive with a formal countersuit against Musk. Their accusations focus on what they call a pattern of harassment. This includes press attacks, malicious campaigns using his social media reach, that pretextual demand for corporate records, the harassing legal claims he filed, and that sham bid.
So basically everything he's done publicly against them.
Pretty much. They argue his actions are bad faith tactics meant to harm the company, slow them down, and ultimately grab their innovations for himself, or XAI. They're asking the court for an order to stop Musk from further unlawful and unfair action and unfairly attacking them, and to hold him legally responsible for the damages they claim he's already caused. This really marks a major escalation, right? Moving beyond just defending themselves to actively pursuing legal action against him.
Yeah, this has definitely moved beyond just a legal disagreement. It's now a full-blown legal war. And with a trial currently scheduled for March 2026, wow, this is likely going to drag on for a while.
It certainly looks that way. These legal proceedings really highlight how high-stakes tech fights often play out in court. OpenAI keeps trying to frame Musk's actions as driven by competitive reasons, aimed at boosting XAI. Musk, including XAI as a co-plaintiff, definitely adds weight to that view.
Right.
The takeover bid episode also showed how these legal and business strategies get tangled up and used tactically. OpenAI definitely used that bid to paint Musk as contradictory. And now, with their countersuit, they're actively fighting back against his narrative and trying to hold him accountable.
It's almost like a high-tech soap opera, isn't it? Robots, billions of dollars. But underneath all the legal papers and the back and forth slams, there seem to be some really fundamental philosophical differences here, wouldn't you
Mm,
say, about like the best way to actually develop and govern this incredibly powerful AI tech.
absolutely. Beneath all the legal fighting lies some really deep disagreements about the nature of AI development and where it should go. One key area is AI safety and the timeline for AGI. Musk has long publicly worried about the potential existential risks of uncontrolled superintelligence.
She's been very vocal about that.
His lawsuit implicitly suggests OpenAI, driven by profit and its Microsoft ties, is maybe being reckless about safety. He's argued before that aggressive AI investment, under his direction of course, was needed to safely compete. He's also said the current OpenAI board isn't qualified to oversee AI safety or even know when AGI arrives.
Whereas OpenAI seems to be arguing, no, we are deeply committed to safety, and our capped profit model is actually the best way to get the huge resources needed to do it responsibly.
Exactly. They argue their unique governance structure, with the nonprofit board having ultimate oversight, is specifically designed to keep safety paramount, even within a commercial framework. They contend that staying at the cutting edge technically is actually vital for ensuring AI safety, and their big Microsoft partnership includes significant collaboration on safety research and protocols. The whole debate over whether GPT-4 is even AGI just highlights how fuzzy those definitions are and who gets to decide which OpenAI's current structure basically leaves in their own hands. It really underlines the tension between the massive money needed to advance AI and the critical need for extreme caution and transparency about the risks. Musk seems to want a more centralized control model focused intensely on safety, while OpenAI is banking on their more distributed, admittedly complex, hybrid structure to balance the mission with practical needs. It's a seriously tough problem with no easy answers.
And then there's that whole open source versus commercial secrecy thing, which seems right at the heart of Musk's initial complaints.
Yes, Musk is very insistent that OpenAI betrayed a fundamental promise to be open source. He points to the closed nature of models like GPT-4 as proof they're prioritizing profit, especially Microsoft's, over public benefit. He often sarcastically uses their name, OpenAI, as ironic evidence of this alleged betrayal.
Right, the close AI jabs.
OpenAI, though, counters that Musk's view of their initial open commitment is way too simple. They've pointed to emails suggesting he understood, and even agreed, that as they neared AGI, they'd likely need to be less open about the underlying science specifics.
Okay.
They now argue their main focus shifted to ensuring broad access to and widespread benefit from AI tech, not necessarily open sourcing every single piece. They point to ChatGPT's wide availability, including a free version, as proof they're delivering on broad access. They also suggest keeping the most advanced stuff proprietary is necessary for both safety and to stay competitive. Even their founding documents had that caveat about open sourcing when applicable, and anticipated maybe reducing disclosure for safety reasons later.
So it sounds like open was maybe always meant to be more of a guiding light with room for practical adjustments rather than a strict unbreakable rule.
That seems to be the case, yeah. And finally, there's the ongoing clash over control. Musk, it seems, initially wanted significant authority, directly or via Tesla. Now he sees OpenAI as effectively controlled by Microsoft's profit motives.
OpenAI, on the other hand, resisted his control attempts, stressing their commitment to a broader mission for all humanity. They championed their current hybrid structure, with the nonprofit board oversight, as the way to balance resource needs with their core mission and maintain a more distributed control. Ultimately, it really boils down to fundamentally different visions for guiding this incredibly powerful technology. Centralized leadership under one person versus a more distributed, complex structure. And at the core is that somewhat fuzzy concept of benefit humanity, which both sides use to justify their actions, even though they have very different ideas on how to actually achieve it.
This whole saga must be creating some pretty significant waves throughout the wider AI industry, right? It's not just some personal spat between tech billionaires.
Absolutely. This fight has huge implications across the whole AI landscape. First, it clearly positions Musk's xAI as a major direct competitor to OpenAI, turning a past collaboration into a fierce rivalry. OpenAI's own legal filings even suggest Musk's actions aim to slow them down to help xAI.
Right, the competitive angle is explicit now. Second, it puts a really bright spotlight on that complex OpenAI-Microsoft partnership. Musk's legal challenges highlight how crucial that alliance is, and any instability there could really shake up the competitive balance in AI, especially versus Google DeepMind. Third, this high-profile fight could change how investors look at AI startups. The intense scrutiny on OpenAI's governance, the legal risks, it might make investors more wary of complex structures or demand clearer alignment with stated missions. The fact that a big SoftBank investment in OpenAI is reportedly waiting on their successful conversion to for-profit just underlines the huge financial stakes.
And OpenAI's unique capped profit model itself is now under a very intense microscope. Can it actually work? Can it balance profit-seeking with purpose when we're talking billions in investment?
Exactly. That model was an innovative fix for a specific problem, but now the whole industry is watching. Can it really function as intended long-term? Can a nonprofit board genuinely oversee a massive commercial operation like this? The internal drama they had with Altman's brief ousting already raised big questions about board effectiveness and the tensions in this hybrid setup.
True.
The lawsuit also brings up broader legal questions about nonprofit governance. How much can they evolve, especially adding for-profit parts without betraying their original purpose or donor intent? The outcome here could really impact how other nonprofits in capital-heavy fields handle partnerships or structural changes. OpenAI's model was groundbreaking, but its novelty also makes it a prime target in this legal fight. Ultimately, this whole thing is fueling demands for more transparency and accountability across the entire AI sector.
And it absolutely has to be catching the eye of regulators worldwide, right? All this talk about safety, control, potential monopolies.
You can bet on it. This high-profile fight involving tech that could reshape society, plus accusations of mission drift and anti-competitive behavior, it's definitely on regulators' radar globally. The case hits several key areas where regulators are already thinking about new rules: competition law, AI safety standards, corporate governance. We've already seen some scrutiny of the Microsoft OpenAI link in the UK and EU, though no formal actions yet. The US FTC has also voiced concerns about AI competition broadly. This lawsuit could definitely push regulators to take a much closer look. Finally, it's really intensified the debate within the AI research community about open source versus proprietary models. Musk champions openness for safety and broad benefit. OpenAI defends their more closed approach for advanced models due to their safety concerns and competitive needs. It's a really complex trade-off. And beyond the legal stuff, this is also a massive battle for public perception. Musk is trying to position himself as the principal guardian of the original vision. OpenAI is trying to paint him as a disgruntled former insider and self-interested competitor. How this narrative war plays out could really affect public trust in AI, future regulation, and the industry's overall path.
So what's the big picture takeaway from this incredibly complex and still unfolding story? It really feels like this initially, idealistic vision for developing AI ran smack into the very real-world challenges of getting massive funding, dealing with intense competition, and fundamental disagreements about how best to actually manage and safeguard this potentially world-changing tech.
That's a very accurate way to put it. The initial idealism that marked OpenAI's founding definitely hit the hard realities of cutting-edge AI development. The legal battle isn't just about a perceived broken promise. It truly reflects fundamental disagreements about AI's future. Should it be open and nonprofit? Or as a more commercial approach, maybe with strong safeguards, the only viable path to both innovation and safety in this field that's moving so incredibly fast?
And this ongoing legal fight, with a trial apparently set for way out in March 2026, is likely to have some pretty significant, long-lasting effects on the entire AI world, no matter who technically wins in court.
Absolutely. The outcomes here will likely ripple out, influencing future competition in AI, how AI companies are structured and governed, and the continuing debates about ethics and regulation. It really leaves us, and hopefully everyone listening, with a lot to think about regarding both the huge promise and the potential dangers of advanced AI, and the very human conflicts that are actively shaping where it's headed. What specific parts of this clash do you find most compelling, or maybe most concerning, and what do you think the long-term fallout might be? These are exactly the kinds of critical questions we'll all need to keep asking as AI continues its incredibly rapid evolution.